That's not an issue. So I'm Gajendra Shekhawat. I'm both with the Department of Material Science and Engineering, and then I'm also managing this SPID Center, which is a scanning probe, imaging and instrumentation development. So I'm here, since the Nuance started in 2002, and then I have seen the growth, the rapid growth that Nuance has done over the last 2 decades. So I'll be talking about the advances in functional scanning probe imaging. So you know that traditionally people are used to do a scanning probe microscope where they come and say, okay, let's do a surface roughness measurements, or get the information about the height of the samples or the features. Now the AFM had advanced to a pretty deep level where you can do a lot of other things like more quantitative and more functional. So I will touch base with a few of these techniques. It's not a time for me to cover everything, but I will touch base with most of the thing. So before I go there, so let me introduce something about the scanning probe microscope. So who are the inventors? So back in 1986, the Nobel Prize was given to just Binning and Rohrer. So developing scanning tunneling microscopes, they use that things to measure the atomic resolution for conducting materials. And then this is the first scanning tunneling microscope. You can see a pretty handmade system, and Christopher Gerber is just looking at, trying to put the probe inside the tip holder. So you can see a pretty old, decent handmade system that gave them the Nobel Prize in 1986. And then this is how it looks like, a complete system. Okay, and then this is like a heating and cooling, some pipe assembly is there. And this is what they trace some displacement of these probes. And this is what they get the atomic resolution in silicon. And that was the first atomic resolution image showing the 7x7 structure of silicon with this handmade scanning tunneling microscopes. And then pretty decent amount of these researchers, they used to took part in developing these technologies. So you can see some of the prominent figures sitting in the front rows. And they are pretty well, have developed these technologies in the late 80s. And then today is a very popular technique. You can all know that in the hard work of these people. And they are still going on. A few of them are still going on in developing further techniques. And this is how the system is this in the London Museum of Science and Technology. The original AFM that was built in the Zurich Center, IBM Zurich Center, by these people. And then you can see when they developed that system, this is how they built this carbon monoxide man. Looks like it's not pretty good, but you can see that as a molecular scales, they can physically move these atoms from the lattice, and they manipulate those atoms to create these nanostructures. Just like, somebody is like sticking, these figures are placing carbon onto the surface using scanning tunneling microscopes, okay? But that's what they do. It's pretty similar to with familiar with the needle point, and by placing small stitches on the surface, you can make these designs. So this was the first beginning of these scanning tunneling microscopes. Now you can see a lot of other techniques that came out of this. Scanning probe microscopy is pretty generic term, but a lot of these techniques that existing today, and we will touch base with them. You can see all these are functional AFMs where you can quantify a lot of electrical, magnetic properties, mechanical properties. You can measure surface potentials. And ultrasonic force microscopy, where you can measure the mechanical properties, pretty high resolution. So in the chemical force microscopy, now we are thinking also of integrating the AFM with the chemical IDs, where you can integrate with the nano IR. So you can also do the chemical mapping at the nanoscale. You can also do the TERS spectroscopy at the nanoscale. So optical resolution down to 10 nanometer. So in this category, the first one is the peak force quantitative AFM, and that was developed by the Bruker a few years back. And then that basically brought in a lot of these advances in the scanning probe microscope. And we have seen that in the conventional AFM, you have a contact mode and a tapping mode, where mostly contact mode is used for high resolution and the tapping mode is usually used for measuring the soft materials. But the peak force tapping scanning probe microscope, we know that there are two primary causes of tip and sample damage. So any lateral force that tip exerts on the sample can cause the sample to tear, the tip plows through the sample. So likewise, the lateral forces from a hard sample can cause the end of a tip to fracture and break off. So normal forces can also cause damage to both tip and sample. Even there is not enough normal force to damage the sample, there can still be enough to deform the sample, increasing the contact area. So in this regard, the peak force tapping, the probe and samples are, intermittently, they brought together, similar to the tapping mode, to contact the surface, but for a short period, so which eliminates the lateral forces, just like a tapping. So unlike tapping mode, where the feedback loop keeps the cantilever vibration amplitude constant, in the peak force tapping, basically controls the maximum force. That's called the peak force on the probe. So this process, prevents the tip from damaging from the sample. Okay, so this is a very popular. Here we oscillate, we modulate the probe at 1 or 2 kilohertz, which is well below the resonant frequency of the cantilevers. And the advantage of this technique is basically you can look at the graph, force separation graph. You can see here we can quantify a lot of things. You can do the adhesion measurements. You can do the energy dissipation, which is basically under the area under this loop here, if you have adhesion. And then you can also do the deformation, how much sample has been deformed. And the most important that a lot of people are users are using is basically you can extract the reduced Young's modulus. Okay, so the unloading. So you can just fit the unloading curve of this force curve, which is the blue on the green part, and you just measure the stiffness, fit that curves and measure the modulus. There are different models are used. But most popular is the DMT model, which is the Derazoon-Muller-Toporov model. So they use that to extract the modulus of the samples. And it's pretty accurate. So you can do a modulus for anywhere from kilopascals here to thousands of gigapascals. And the most important part here is the probe selection. You can choose an appropriate probe of a different stiffness, or basically spring constant, and measure those mechanical properties, energy dissipation, and deformation. And then you can see in the images here, the bottom left, you can see, you can also get a typical topography image, deformation image, modulus image, adhesion image. So very popular techniques. And we have this technique on all of our systems. A lot of users are using, and especially this is also very popular for monitoring the cell dynamics in real time. So all living cells are dynamic, changing shapes due to the rearrangement of their cytoskeleton scaffold, and spreading and migrating on the cell culture substrates. So these processes and the mechanical changes that accompany them can be monitored with peak force, because the forces between the tip and samples are in the pico-Newton range as compared to nanonewtons in the tapping mode. So you are exerting a pretty low force on the sample that allows you to measure the mechanical properties of the biological samples. And we have that capability in terms of a Bruker Bioscope Resolve, and we can do both in air and liquid. And then the important thing about this technique is that you do your calibration first before you measure the unknown sample. So this is pretty standard that people do in an indentor system, where you calibrate on a quad sample, and then you can measure the hardness of unknown materials. So having said that, then we have a peak force tuner, which is a tunneling AFM or tunneling current measurements. So you can see here on the bottom left in the figure, usually we use a typical conducting AFM probe. And in the traditional AFM, conducting AFM imaging, the tip was exerting, basically putting a lot of force on the cantilever, on the sample surface. And what happened, these cantilevers are coated pretty thin metallic, the thin metals has been coated on these cantilevers. And what happened, when the cantilever interacts with the sample surface and when it applies a large force in basically the contact mode, the coatings ripped off. And it's a pretty troublesome, in the middle of your experiments, your coating is not there and you're not getting your image. So that was a problem. And also, given the cost of these probes are pretty high, they use this peak force tapping and incorporated in this conducting AFM. Now it's called the peak force tuner, where obviously your sample is applying, the probe is applying a pretty low force, so you can sustain a longer lifetime of these probes with the metal coating, and you can get a high resolution images. So you can see here at the bottom left figure, this is how the force, the maximum force you can see at the position C, where the force is pretty maximum on the sample, so you can see a large current. So you can get a peak force current, so you can see the image of the left is a topography image of carbon nanotubes, a lot of nanoparticles there. And when you see that topography, you can image both nanoparticles and carbon nanotubes. So carbon nanotubes has electrodes on them and nanoparticle doesn't have electrodes on them. So when you apply electrical bias, you can see in the peak force tuner on the right image, you can image those carbon nanotubes. Obviously, some nanoparticles are there on these carbon nanotubes. So you can see a pretty high current. And then the nanoparticles on the left, you see, they are not connected with electrodes. So basically, there is no charge or no current. So you can do a lot of these electrical measurements here. You can go from femtoamp to nanoamp to microamp. And then we have this capability here in this our system. All these icon system we have this capability of doing the peak force. So you can also do both. You can map the electrical current, but you can also do the mechanical properties simultaneously. And then also we have a current spectroscopy mode. So where you can do the current voltage characteristics. And it's pretty quantitative. Then we have a tapping mode AFM. You can also do the magnetic force microscopy. This is also the category of a family of a functional AFM, where you can basically measure the magnetic properties, magnetic gradient that causes shift in the cantilever resonance. So here is a two-prong approach where we use the lift mode. Okay, so lift mode basically allows imaging of relatively very weak magnetic, but long range magnetic interactions while minimizing the influence of surface topography. So basically you can take a topography image, okay? And then what happened, then it lifts and turns the feedback off and moves the probe at a constant height, okay? And then if there's a magnetic gradient there, because we have to use a magnetic probe here, and then that magnetic gradient deflects the cantilever. So basically it shifts its resonant frequency. Okay, so the amount of resonant, the shifts in the frequency of a cantilever is basically equal to the magnitude of the magnetic force. So this type of things we have seen, we have this system in our facility. So you can do a quantitative basically magnetic imaging. You can go down to 20, 25 nanometer resolution with such technique here in this pit. Then in this category further, then how about the speed? A lot of people think that, AFM is a serial imaging and SEMC is a high speed, and that's true. But there are a lot of advances made in the AFM regarding specifically, developing hardwares and tools so you can ramp up the speed of this technique. So now commercially, you can see the AFM methods or instruments are available where you can have one frame in a few milliseconds. So basically you can see the live, the actions within these biomolecular assemblies. You can see the live motion of the molecules. But here in our center, we have a high-speed AFM where you can do topographical imaging, you can do peak force tapping, you can do mechanical mapping, and you can have one frame in 1 second. So it's a pretty high-speed AFM. And it's a pretty popular and fully automated, so you don't need to do a lot of things here, basically alignments and all those things. And that system is available here, and people are using it because, if you have a large number of samples, you can obviously use these techniques. But this system will not provide you any electrical measurements. Obviously, you have to go to the different setups. Then we also have this Bioscope Resolve AFM, which is a life science imaging system, and it is integrated with the fluorescent microscopy, so you can do a lot of these biological imaging. So you can do all these mechanical properties in liquids or different ambience. We have a custom-made, sample holders, Petri dishes. You can take different sizes, and then you can insert the samples. Basically, you can interact the probe with the samples. So you can basically bring your samples, culture them in the Petri dishes. We also have a heating stage, and you can also correlate the optical and AFM images to the Miro software, and also the fluorescent images. So it's a pretty useful tool for life science imaging. You can see one of the example here where we are imaging the section of endothelial cells, okay? And then we are injecting them with a different stimulating agents, and we want to see how that affects the mechanics of these cells across the center and also along the periphery of the cells. So the incorporation of S1P and thrombin, these are different therapeutics. So you can study the effect of therapeutics on the mechanical properties of these cells. So you can see these things with this type of AFM. Then we also have ultrasonic force microscope. So normally in AFM, what happened, you interact with the sample surface, but your indentation is pretty small because of the nature of the tip sample interactions. So you really will not get that much, the mechanical property if you have under layers. So how we can understand the mechanical properties if you want to go 10, 15 nanometer below the top layers. If you want to extract some mechanical properties, you cannot do with the conventional AFM. You have to do the nano indentation, but the nano indentation also, you cannot indent 10, 15 nanometer because of the size of the probe. So this technique came ultrasonic force microscopy, where here we oscillate the sample at a pretty high frequency. So you can create an out of plane vibration of the sample, and that indent the probe to the high contact force with elastic contact. So basically you can compress that part. And then that technique allows you to measure the mechanical properties. Through force distance curves, you can extract the mechanical properties of the layers below that. How deep we can go, we haven't tried that much, but a few layers below surface, you can do it. Then you can see the examples of a metal interconnects where you see the metal lines. So whatever the softer region appears as a darker contrast in these images, and the brighter contrast in the topography, which is a stiffer material, appears as a darker contrast. So you can see on the bottom right image, you can even see clearly the sidewalls and the CMP polishing effects in these metal interconnect lines. All these black spots are basically the effect of CMP polishing. So you can see the change in the mechanical properties at the edges when you do the CMP process on these metal interconnects. But then later on, we came up with another technique, right? Rather than oscillating the sample, we are also oscillating the probe simultaneously at two different frequencies. We use the piezo crystals to excite those out of plane vibrations. And what happened when the cantilever is basically a reference cantilever because it's made of the same material, so frequency will not shift. So when these two oscillating objects interact with each other, they create a difference frequency. And that frequency is pretty low enough, so the cantilever can easily pick up those modulating waves, and we can extract the subsurface information, because when you excite the sample, if it has any defects underneath it, it can delay the phase. It can change the phase of that wave that's reaching at the surface. So basically we are measuring the change in the phase. So it's non-destructive, it's a depth sensitive, it's pretty good lateral resolution, and it's very sensitive to phase perturbations. And then we have used this for different metal interconnects. So you can see in the right side, these are different metal interconnects with different heights, different layers. And then you can see left side is a pretty decent topography image. Right side, you can see here, these are different buried internal voids. So if you have cracks or voids at the interface of this metal and the substrate, you cannot detect in topography. what you can detect in these techniques. Okay, so this technique is available here. And this is one of the nicest technique to measure the subsurface structures. Now we have seen things down to few nanometers. How much depth you can go, it depends, on the type of the acoustics waves that you can use. If you oscillate them at a high frequency, you can go much deeper. But we haven't done that much research how deep we can go. But latest in this category, we use the nanoparticles with the magnetic core. So if you're familiar, people use TMs to study or to see the core cell embedded in the silicon. Okay, so you have to use the TM. But here you can see bottom left, top right is basically a typical tapping mode image of these silica particles, which has a magnetic core. You cannot see those magnetic cores. And then the bottom left is basically the conventional tapping mode image, where you can see different contrasts based on the surface elastic properties. But the bottom right is the ultrasonic image, where you can see the embedded magnetic particle, the contrast coming from the magnetic particles, the silica core. So you can clearly see those magnetic particles embedded in the silica core with this ultrasound holography. So that basically allows you to image subsurface structures. So basically, if somebody wants to track nanoparticles within the cellular network, you can do that. You can image those nanoparticles within those networks, and we have seen those things. And then this is another example, so endothelial cells, and then you can see when we inject drug in these cells, basically these stress fiber or intracellular fibers are formed. And if you see the left, the typical topography image, you cannot see it, but on the right side, when you can look at these things, you can see pretty decent stress fibers or intracellular fibers that form, that reflect in the ultrasonic images. So you can clearly see here, so wherever the change in the mechanical strength or mechanical properties, this ultrasound can pick up those mechanical variations and can reflect in the image. Then I will move on to the another functional AFM, which is basically high resolution thermal imaging. So that was, I developed this with a Bay Area company, App Nano. So basically here, if you have seen in the literature that the conventional thermocouples based scanning thermal imaging systems, it's not a very high resolution, 200 nanometer, 300 nanometers. Thermocouples is in direct contact with the samples, and also take the lateral heat and everything and degrade the resolutions. But here, the typical design is also pretty important here. So here you can see a thermocouple junction in that schematics you can see is buried inside a hollow silicon probe. It's a pyramidal silicon probe. It's a pretty hollow from inside. And the junction, thermocouple junction is within that. It's not directly exposed to the sample. So what happened, what is the advantage is that you will not, the lateral heat flux, heat flow will not affect the probe. And also, a probe is not sensitive to the temperature variation in the sample. So what happens, suppose your sample temperature is pretty high. If you use a normal thermocouple probe directly hitting the surface, what happens? Because of the high temperature, the probe will bend because of the heat. But here, the thermocouple is not in contact with the sample. So through the thermocouple, a metal wire is coming out. That wire makes a contact with the sample surface. And that allows us to image the thermal structures and nanostructures down to 20 nanometer, which is not possible with any other techniques to get this thermal resolution down to 20 nanometer. And you can basically also, you can heat the probe up to 700 degrees centigrade. You can heat the probe, and then the probe will not bend, or you can heat the sample. So basically, because of the thermocouple junction within the hollow silicon probe, it doesn't bend the cantilever. So you can map the high temperatures also. So you can example here, in the figure here, micro heaters, apply the bias, the heater, just heats up, but you can see this thermal probe can easily measure the temperatures. And then you can, reach out, you basically look at those publications which provide the details. But this is another examples where you use the magnetic, basically this nanoparticles, gold nanoparticles within the silica structures. Okay, so the idea is that we just want to see whether we can see the thermal contrast from the gold nanoparticles. So basically, in the thermal imaging, when there is a conducting particles or conducting regions, it draws more heat from the probe. Okay, so you can map the thermal conductivity. So you can have both thermal conductivity, you can have a temperature mapping. So the dark contrast in the image indicates, more conducting area because it can draw more heat from the probe. And we are hitting the probe through a laser, okay, around 40, 42 degrees. But you can see here in the bottom image, you can see the contrast coming from those gold nanoparticles. And in the topography, you don't see anything. So you can basically see the thermal contrast from embedded structures. So what happened, this opened up a wide range of applications, especially in the biomaterials where we are developing in the probe that, you can do in liquids, where you can get a thermal contrast from nanoparticles. People are using nanoparticles for drug delivery, so we can get a contrast how particle is moving within the cellular network. So this opened up a lot of application, especially, with this high resolution thermal mapping. And then you can see here, we have used in different applications where 2D materials, hot spots in these 2D materials is very popular, when you build this ohmic contact or whatever the contacts on these layered structures. And when you apply the bias, you can see some hot spots are created across these metal and these heterostructure junctions. So you can map those hot spots with this technique. So it has opened a wide range of applications. Okay, so now with this technique, you can also do the temperature mapping. Okay, so the temperature mapping in the sense that, thermal conducting mapping that we are doing is right now is a qualitative. We are trying to figure out, how we can make it more quantitative. But the temperature mapping is more quantitative. You can see here, we use these nanoparticles and we put the polymer film on the top of these particles. So what happened? You heat those particles. We use the magnetic coil structures and we apply the magnetic field to heat these nanoparticles. So it's basically only heating the particles, okay? Because those are conducting particles, they can easily heat it up. So we are basically not heating the whole samples, we are heating those particles. And then you can see the bottom right image is basically the thermal temperature gradients in these structures. So you can map or measure the temperature of these individual nanoparticles. And on the top, then what we did in one of the experiments, we coat with the polymers that can melt at 40, 50 degrees centigrade. And the particles are underneath it. So you can see here the melting of these polymer films when the particles heated up. So it's pretty localized. So you can basically individually heat these nanoparticles and you can use for a wide range of applications for these materials. So this system is available in the facility. And then for the last year or so, people are using it. So if you like to use these systems we have in these facilities, we can help you with your experiments and all those things. Going down further, there are other conventional AFM, functional AFM techniques that we have. We have a scanning peak force, Kelvin force microscopy, where you can measure the work function of the materials. You can measure the surface potential of the materials. You can also do the piezo response force microscopy. We are trying to put together a scanning capacitance microscopy model where you can do the scanning capacitance microscopy. It means you can measure the dopant profile, pretty high resolution. You can do a CV profile. So those type of technique systems we have. We also do have a photo conducting AFM where you can shine the laser from the bottom and excite the electron hole pairs and use the probe to measure those photo currents. So basically open up a large number of applications, especially in the photovoltaics and 2D materials. And some people are using it. So that system or setup is also here. So basically we have 4 or 5 of these AFM systems. All of them are loaded with every capabilities that is possible in any AFM system. And now we are working together to integrate this AFM with the IR imaging. So we are trying to acquire the system. There's open up a whole, chemical imaging at the nanoscale. And you can also do the near field optical imaging with 10 nanometer resolution. So basically you can study the plasmonic structures in the 2D materials with that type of system. It doesn't end here. We have used this liquid AFM to basically to a different angle, how we can detect protein, this COVID with these cantilevers, with AFM setup. And if you want to use it, you can come and use it. Basically, it's not like you have to detect COVID. If you want to detect any other antigen antibody interactions, we have the setup here in our lab where we can allow you to measure these cantilevers. So here, basically, you can see the optical cantilevers. You coat them with the antibodies and with the antigens, and what happened due to their interaction, they bend, and then we use the optical detection of the AFM setup to monitor the bending of that cantilevers. That's indicative of antigen and antibody interaction. So you can see here in the next image, you can see we have detected S protein and N proteins of this COVID-2, COVID-19, and then you can see the deflection of the probe, indicative of that, pretty sensitiveness of this method and technology. So you can basically, it's not for imaging. The idea is that you can use this technique for all kind of different applications, whether it is magnetic or electrical or chemical or mechanical, electrical, and obviously surface profile and all those things. And the PIC4 stepping and open up a whole lot of high resolution imaging. You can do liquid, air, different temperatures. You can do in different solvents or solutions. And in that, you can see here, you can do all sort of these optical sensing detection through these optical methods. And then I covered basically use this frequency type approach. You can oscillate samples and probes together, where you can do a subsurface imaging, this defect analysis deeper under the surface. Okay, so I will end here, and I'd like to see if anybody has any questions related to these techniques or what techniques we are available within the facility.
Anybody have any questions? There's one in the chat.
Yeah, so one of the question is that does SPID has any, okay, let me see. Does SPID has any plan to acquire a UHV AFM for atomic resolution? So I don't think so, because the UHV AFM system is a pretty complex approach to get atomic resolution. You have to wait some time for days to get that image, and it's pretty complex, especially for in the user's facility setup. In the research, it's okay, but we don't have any plans. But with the PIC4 stepping, if you have atomically flat surface, you can get atomic resolution at a high speed. But obviously, we don't have any plan for a UHV setup. Okay, there's another question that are there capabilities to do these SPM measurements for ambient sensitive materials? Yes, you can do that. We don't have a glove box, but we have a closed chamber or a hood where you can pass on different gases, which are obviously those gases need to be friendly. It's not like, we cannot use toxic gases. And you can create basically, you can purge the nitrogen within the cantilever sample setup. And then we can create a small glove box within that area. People have done in the past, and then purge with the nitrogen to create the inert, basically environment where your samples are not oxidized and all those things. That is possible, that requires a little change in the setup, and people have done in the past, so we can do it.
Any more questions from anyone?
So another question is that, do we have a cooling stage? How low temperature? Yes, we do have a cooling stage that was built by some of the students a couple of years ago. And then I believe that we can go to negative 35 degrees Celsius. Even we can go lower, but sometimes what happens, you have to create an inert environment within the tip sample area, so no ice crystals are formed. So we do have, and then the higher side, we can go up to 100 degrees Celsius. And if you have basically a vacuum type system, then you even can go to 300, 400, but in our setup, we cannot go more than 100 because then a problem is with the piezo. You know, if you heat the piezo at a high temperature, then a lot of hysteresis and creeps happen. But we can go negative 35 and higher safely around 100 or 135 degree. And then if you're specific, you need more on information, you know, if you want to read about this thermal mapping, which is the new tool, and ultrasonic imaging, you know, we have the, in this presentation, you can see, you know, the references, the papers we publish, you know, you can look at those things, or you can always call me to have more information about these techniques.
Okay, thank you everyone for coming. If there's no more questions.
And there's one more.
One more. Go ahead.
Okay, let me see. So what other materials can be detected with this tool? Can water molecules be observed? So I don't know what type of tools, but we have the liquid imaging setup where we have image hydrogels, individual cells or adults, these Alzheimer particles down to 5 nanometer resolution. So regarding the water molecules, I'm not sure because anything that stick on the surface need to stick on the surface before we image them. Anything which is floating, we cannot do that. So basically any nanomolecules or nanoparticles you want to image in liquid, you can do it, but it has to be fixed on the substrate before you image it. So yes, we can do that. And there's another question that, how about the accuracy for the temperature measuring? Yes. So yes, in the thermal imaging setup, we can go down to 0.04 degrees Celsius, and it's pretty accurate. We have also a calibration system, so we can calibrate the probe also, and through that calibration, we can measure the temperature. So you have seen that all those scales are the temperature scales, and accuracy is pretty good, consistent. Minimum we have seen is 0.04 degrees Celsius.
All right, I think that
Okay.
looks like it's it. So thank you everybody for attending.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.